Welcome to Faith Family First. I'm Jim Hochberg. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming ballot that you're going to start getting in your mail October 21st because it has some charter amendment proposals. We're only going to cover Kauai because KSU Radio carries this for the people on Kauai and Honolulu, obviously. But you know what? If you're on Maui or the Big Island, or Molokai or Lanai, if it's not Kauai and Oahu, listen up because the approach to the questions can be the same for you, even though we're not necessarily going to get into the substance of the proposed changes. But we just don't have time to do them all, and Maui had a lot. But anyway, stick with us and let's talk about that. So, Eva, you ready for charter stuff?
Let me speak on behalf of everyone watching and listening right now.
Oh, no, we're going to make this really interesting.
No, okay, Jim, let's be honest. When people are at the ballot box or now here in the state of Hawaii, they're looking at their ballot and they get questions that are like, the expletum of the master logical fraction of a lingo is a square root to the comprehension of the third power. Yes or no?
Well, that's why we're going to do this show. Because
so listeners,
we vote and we have political power according to Article 1, Section 1 of the state constitution, and we must exercise our political power. So what we want to do today is talk about first the Kauai proposals and then the Honolulu proposals. But before we even get into the proposals, I want to talk about what frame of mind I use when I get asked these questions, because the way I view it is the way James Madison viewed it. And he wrote a bunch of the Federalist Papers, one of them Federalist 51, and he actually published Federalist 51 February 6, 1788. But the Constitution that he was supporting that was adopted the next year is so good, it still applies. We're still using that same federal Constitution. What he said, it was Federalist 51, is trying to get people to understand the structure of the Constitution, not being the government running things, but the people running things. And what he says is, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. Think about that. That's pretty true, right? We could trust angels. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, meaning no angels, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, the people, and in the next place, obligate the government to control itself. A dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control on government. That's why Constitution of Hawaii, Section 1, Article 1 says all political power in this state is held by the people. But he goes on to say, but experience has taught mankind the necessity of having other precautions. And then he goes on to talk about the separation of powers. The federal government has this power, the state governments have that power, local governments have this power. So in the charter situation, in case people don't know, the county charter on all the islands is equivalent to the state constitution for the county government, which means it sets up how the county government's going to work, who's going to do the work, how they get there, what their responsibilities are. And in order for the charter to have been adopted, just like the federal constitution, just like the state of Hawaii constitution in 1959, the people had to vote for it at a supermajority. So when they want to amend it, they have to come back to us. And what I want to make sure everybody realizes, when the county council, which is the legislative body on the counties, or the state legislature, which is the legislative body at the state of Hawaii, or Congress, the Senate and the House, the legislative body federally, They take your vote for them as candidates and they exercise it without your help every time they vote on legislation, except when they're asking for your approval to amend the county charter, the state constitution, or the federal constitution.
Now,
so you have really big power right now on these charter amendments. And what bothers me is how lightly voters in Hawaii seem to take their power over these requested votes.
well, people, for the most part, don't even know who their city council members are. And I know that when there have been issues that have come up in certain areas, we've tried to encourage people to weigh in, and people don't weigh in as much on the city council hearings as they do on the legislative
Correct.
hearings. But I think that before we jump into this, it's to make clear that when you have these charter questions in front of you, just like I believe with a constitutional question, a blank vote is considered a no vote.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So it doesn't work the same way?
The county charters describe that on the county level. In the state of Hawaii, a state constitutional amendment, no vote, blank vote is a no vote, but not necessarily.
Okay, so how do people find out? Because that's important.
I would say don't leave it blank. Actually do your homework. In fact, that's why we're doing this show.
Yes.
So you got these proposed charter amendments on your ballot, and the state is mandated, the counties are mandated to provide educational materials to explain to you. So we're going to have the website for Kauai and Honolulu, hopefully Maui and all of them.
We'll have them all.
Click on the link if you're on YouTube. If you're on the radio, go to YouTube when you get home. Grab the educational materials early. Study them, read them, understand them. Please do not wait till the last minute to just grab your ballot because you got to mail it and just pick something. Don't do it.
And you don't have to wait till you get your ballot. That's the important thing. You can click on the link right now and look at it. And here's another tip. If you're reading the question, and even with the information they provide, if it still doesn't make sense to you, then contact your city council person and say, what is this? And what are you trying to accomplish by this? Or even the candidates that are running.
And ask them, what is the unintended consequence that's likely to flow?
Right.
Because that's what you want to know. And they're not going to bring that up.
They're going to have their talking points.
Exactly.
Especially on all of these things. Even when there's a bill moving through the legislature, they all have their talking points. And that's all you'll get. So you're right. Dig down
when
deeply.
you're looking at changes to the Constitution, either of the state or the charter in the county, because the charter in the county describes how the county government's going to work, be suspicious, because most of the proposed changes are changes so that the government workers can more easily do what they want to do, which they can't do without changing the language. So they're not necessarily doing you a favor by proposing this change. Really keep that in mind.
And I would also strongly recommend, now it's not going to help you right now with the questions in front of you, because like Jim said, you got to know what the questions are in front of you and how to vote. But moving forward in the legislative session, when you're talking about your city council meetings, you want to go to these meetings. You can even watch them online because you want to find out why they're trying to get to that.
The education material shares that, and that's what we're going to talk about today for Kauai and Oahu. So the language is crafted by the legislative body in the counties, the county council, through that legislative process, which means a bill got proposed, it had hearings in committees, the language got changed, it went through things until it would get enough votes to pass, which means it's sausage. So if you think back to 2013, in the state of Hawaii special session, we, the people, wanted a bill to preserve marriage to opposite-sex couples. We wanted marriage to be one man and one woman. And the legislature worked on it in their committees, and it came out being approved. And the question was, shall the legislature have the power to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples? And as you and I remember back then, we did a lot of public education to let people figure out, what does a yes vote mean?
Because yes really
meant
meant no.
And what does a no vote mean? Because if you voted yes for that, it meant more likely no same-sex
Yes,
marriage.
yeah.
If you voted no, it meant you already have same-sex marriage. But by the language through that sausage process, they don't make it easy. So the constitutional amendment passed in 2013. The legislature had the power to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples. Did the legislature reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples? No, because in 1996, I think, 1998, we voted on that. In 2013, they created same-sex marriage. So that whole thing we went through in the 90s to make marriage one man and one woman in Hawaii didn't work.
And it's so funny because we said that at the time. We were like, we didn't like the question because we knew that they could do that. Because all we were doing is saying they have the right to reserve marriage, which meant that they also had the right to not reserve marriage.
Correct.
So we knew that.
So
yes,
legislative shenanigans is how these questions got on the ballot.
And
so you got to realize that.
And the language on these questions, for everybody that has gone through elections before, they know they're not written in normal language.
So what I want us to do is think through this process when we're responding to voting on the amendments. First of all, it's not easy to understand why those committees came up with that language unless you were there. If you're looking at your ballot, you don't know. Okay? It's important that the government be transparent, so they have to do this educational piece. Go get it and read it so that you do understand. So I came up with these rules. For me, if you want to amend the document that forms your government and I have to be asked to vote yes, no, I'm not doing it. Change my mind.
So you always start with a no.
I always am not going to vote for it because I like it the way it is, and your sausage isn't making it better for me. It's making it better for the government.
So you're like Louder with Crowder that says, change my mind.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, number 2, it's the duty of the proposer of this sausage-made language to transparently explain to me and you why this is something I should vote for. Why should this change my mind? They should explain to me the reason for it and what the change would be at the end. That's why you look at the paperwork that they're required to provide, which the links are here, and see if it makes sense to you. Number 3, read the proposed language that's on the ballot. Read the ballot language. So we'll get to those in a minute. If I can't tell from the language why it's needed, you haven't changed my mind. I'm still voting no. Number 4, if the language doesn't tell me the intended result, you haven't changed my mind. I'm still voting no. And finally, if somehow I am ready to vote yes because all of that stuff was met in the language, if I'm going to vote yes, I have to think about what are the unintended consequences that could arise if I do vote yes. Because chances are they're never going to tell you that. You just got to pray about it. Let the Holy Spirit tell you what's going on here. So let's look at the Kauai one. There's 4.
Before you do that real quick, have you ever voted yes?
I think I voted yes in 1996 on the marriage one. I'm pretty sure I did.
1998.
I'm pretty sure I did. But
that's
that
only
was a
because
long time ago.
Is that the only time?
Sure I did, but I don't have a present recollection of that vote, but I'm sure I did.
Okay.
So City and County of Honolulu Charter Amendments number 1. Shall the revised city charter be amended to increase the mandatory percentage of the city's estimated real property tax revenues to be appropriated annually for deposit into the Affordable Housing Fund from 0.5% to 1%. So there's a lot of stuff in there that we have no idea what it's talking about.
Well, I will tell you, probably from organizations like Catholic Charities standpoint, they're going to tell you that they can only do the work they do with the money that goes into the Affordable Housing Fund.
But that's not true, because if they weren't relying on the government, if the church was providing the resources to do affordable housing stuff the way they originally did, it wouldn't be needed.
Except that let's talk reality. That's not happening. And so with the more and more and more rise of requests for affordable housing, the money's got to come from somewhere in order to build it. So that's why they're saying it's only a 0.5% increase.
Well, but what's interesting is it's a mandatory increase, which means whatever else the city and county of Honolulu is doing with the real property taxes, they're going to have a 0.5% less.
Okay, but can you
whatever it is.
But can you start from the fact that people are already paying 0.5%?
Well, actually, they're paying a whole percent because there are two parts to what happened in 2006. And we actually have two proposed amendments this year. One relates to the 0.5%, and this one relates to this 0.5%.
Right, but the point is that people are already now putting money into this.
However, let's look at this because we need to be change my mind types, as we've talked about. So in 2006, which was only 12 years ago, we voted in the city to amend the charter to use a portion of the city's annual real property tax revenues to create funds for land conservation and affordable housing. I voted no.
I voted
And the
yes.
reason I voted no is I don't like elected people being able to hide behind special funds instead of being responsible and accountable for voting in the committees to use money on bills. I don't like it.
Yeah, I can see why you would take that position. Of course, I was taking the position that, we have a housing issue and it didn't seem like a lot of money to me at the time.
Well, so the real property taxes get paid by people that live on Oahu, and a 0.5% goes to this special fund. I don't like special funds, so change my mind, right? And the special funds were to be dedicated to land conservation and affordable housing, which seem like great ideas. But why not make the council vote on it every time they want to spend the money? Quit hiding behind these mandated special funds. Okay. It also required the city council to allocate 1% of the estimated real property tax revenues split in half. 1/2 to the Clean Water and Natural Lands Fund and 1/2 to the Affordable Housing Fund. Now, this was in 2006. George W. Bush was still the president. 2006, Lingle was the governor. So this climate change thing wasn't really that big of a deal, right? You got to put yourself into perspective.
Right.
Context is everything. So existing law that they have in the bill, because they put it in there, but this is not what they're changing. What it says is money in the Clean Water and Natural Land Fund shall be used to purchase or otherwise acquire real estate or interest in real estate for land conservation for the following purposes: protecting watersheds, preserving quality of water and air, preserving forests, beaches, coastal areas, agricultural lands, public outdoor recreation, education, including access to beaches and mountains. I'm for all of this stuff. It's all great. Preservation of historic or culturally important land areas and sites, protection of habitats and ecosystems, buffer zones. I'm for all this stuff. But I want people to run for re-election because they either voted to do it or they voted not to do it, not because we said, don't worry about it anymore, we'll put it in a special fund. Okay, so change my mind. The law also says that the Clean Water and Natural Lands Advisory Committee was established to consider proposals submitted to it by the city budget of finance and stuff to make recommendations to the council for approval of expenditures. The commission will consist of 7 members, 3 appointed by the mayor, 3 appointed by the council, 1 appointed by majority vote of 6 appointed members. The members will serve for staggered terms. Okay, so this bill amendment says the council believes that increasing the mandatory percentage of taxes to be deposited into the fund will increase funding desperately needed for affordable housing projects and suitable living environments for persons of low and moderate income, and thus is in the best interest of the residents. Okay, fine. They still haven't changed my thoughts because they want to spend the extra money. Don't change the charter.
You're hung up still on the special fund.
That's because I vote for them. I want to vote for them based on their policies.
Fair enough.
So I would say I don't like special funds to hide behind a commission. In 2006, they did this, and we're stuck with 1% every year, going half into each of those 2 funds. Is there any prohibition that stopped the council as elected people from every year increasing the amount they want to spend? No. But they'd be responsible for that spending. And they don't want to be responsible. So I would vote no.
Okay.
Number 2, Shall the revised city charter for Oahu be amended to require that the Planning Commission have at least one member with substantial experience or expertise in one of the following categories of disciplines, that each of the categories be represented by a different member and all the categories be represented on the commission? Native Hawaiian, here's the first one: Native Hawaiian traditional customary practices, Native Hawaiian law, or traditional Hawaiian land use. Number 2, land use planning policies and principles. Number 3, land development and construction. And number 4, climate change and sea level rise, causes, effects, and solutions, or environmental protection and preservation. So I'm already at, I don't want climate change and sea level in this charter because I don't believe they're honest. In fact, there was recently a new study done saying that climate change is not happening. So change my mind.
Yeah,
I don't want that in the charter.
I have a feeling that a lot of people listening are probably feeling the same way about that, because initially when you look at the question, you're thinking, well, of course there should be experts, right, from these different
But it doesn't
fields.
need to be in the charter.
And that, yeah. So,
and when the mayor and the council nominate and approve people that do or don't have whatever qualifications they have, they can be asked to answer for it the next time they run for office.
Yeah. Well, again, this goes back to the what we say, that you should be involved in the process, even on the city council level, because when the hearings were taking place, people could have said, I'm okay with the Native Hawaiian traditional customary practice. I'm okay with the land use planning. I'm okay with the land development. But why do we need climate change? And maybe that could have been a point.
But
I don't
you know what? We don't need any of them, because currently the commission members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. They have complete control over who gets in. They can require these qualifications.
I hear you, and I know, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying in this asking for a person who is an expert in climate change, you're putting someone with a political bent on.
Absolutely.
And that's where some people might say absolutely not. So
okay. Number 3. So the question is, shall the revised charter be amended to expand the permitted uses of funds in the Clean Water and Natural Lands Fund to include funding for costs related to operation, maintenance, and management of lands acquired by way of the fund that are necessary to protect, maintain, or restore resources at risk on these lands, such as infrastructure, environmental remediation, or improvements to provide for public access and use. So this is, again, like the first one for Oahu, the mandatory special fund thing that the council is passing off to you and me to give into perpetuity, that as a standing legislative position for the council, where they don't have to make tough decisions on spending money and then when they run for re-election be held accountable for it. I'm a no, change my mind, right? I mean, seriously. To go over this real quickly, what they're trying to do is add the word significant to the old law in several places with the purpose to yield a significant public benefit. A qualified interest means a perpetual conservation restriction by a qualified organization which has a commitment to protect the conservation purposes and the resources to enforce the restrictions, which is political, completely. It's politics. They don't want to be politicians responsible for doing this. They want you to give them cover. Don't do it. I'm a no. And for costs related to the operation, maintenance, blah, blah, blah. So for number 3, my position is no. You want to run for city councilman in Honolulu? Stand up for your choices, vote for them in the hearing, spend the money, and then tell me why when you run for re-election. And then the last one, we got 3 minutes left. The last one's pretty complicated. Shall the revised charter be amended to update provisions pertaining to the Office of Council Services? That's the office that serves the councilmen. So they're trying to make their job easier. This one has nothing to do with you and me. This is all give more power to the Office of Council Services so that it can serve the council members and make their life easier. So I'm a no, change my mind. The Office of Council Services provides research and drafting for the council to reflect current functions, consolidate various provisions relating to the Office of Council Services that are in separate chapters. So this is like change the charter to make our life easier And just really quickly, nothing changed my mind. I'm not for that.
And actually, we encourage people on Oahu to come and watch Jim and I at One Love on
The 19th of October, 6 p.m.
At 6 p.m. because Jim is actually going to go over these
in much detail.
Just the Oahu ones.
Correct.
In detail a little bit more. And for those of you that might be listening or watching and you're on the Big Island or Maui, we're sorry we didn't get to you. Maui has a ton of charter questions. It would require Jim to do quite a bit of work to come up with that. But again, if you use the principle that he was recommending, that you always start with a no unless they change your mind, then that would be the way to go. And as we always say, don't leave it blank. Use your vote in a responsible way. Yes, if your yes is, as the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And check the links below the YouTube videos because you'll be able to look at these charter questions to make your decision before you get there. Like, subscribe, share, and you want to stay tuned because Jim and I are going to do a very special show in October to celebrate our birthdays. So make sure that you do that.
We're not really twins.
We're not really, but
no.
In any case, we appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today. We know this was a lot of information to throw at you, but stay plugged in.
And you know what would be really good for Hawaii Family Forum? If you go to HFF, HawaiiFamilyForum.org, HawaiiFamilyForum.org, sign up, become a sponsor of the show. If you like this show, share it. Send it to your friends by link or tell them to catch it on the radio on Kauai or Oahu.
And you can also make a donation to Hawaii Family Forum at HawaiiFamilyForum.org. And we are a 501c3, so you can take a tax deduction. So we will see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Vote no. Aloha.